In this short course, we will discuss EU GMP Part 1, the Good Manufacturing Practice Guidelines for Medicinal Products. We will describe how the GMP guidelines are structured and how they work in the EU. We will look into the very essence and cornerstones of quality thinking in the pharmaceutical industry. There are 9 chapters in the EU GMP Part 1 related to quality and the quality management system in pharma. This is a guideline that sits next to the GMP directive. Each chapter corresponds to a specific chapter of the GMP directive. All articles of the GMP directive, which is out of the scope of this course, are law. If a manufacturing site is not following the rules of the directive, it can be taken to court and prosecuted. EU GMP Part 1 guidelines are divided into 9 chapters. Each chapter focuses on a unique principle with specific quality management objectives. The chapters contain the guidelines that provide sufficient detail for manufacturers when considering the implementation of GMP rules. Note that it contains the minimum current GMP guidelines for methods and facilities and the manufacturing, controls, processing, packaging and holding of a drug. It stands to be repeated that the guidelines contain the minimum current GMP to ensure the quality, safety, identity and strength of the medicinal product in question. However, in the CGMP guidelines, you will not find the safety aspects for the personnel engaged in manufacturing. Personal safety is out of the scope of this guideline. Now, let's review each GMP chapter one at a time. First, let's discuss the meaning of quality management. This is a broad concept that covers all matters that influence the quality of a product in the life sciences. To clarify, quality management is the sum of all the arrangements made to ensure medicinal products are of the quality required for their intended use. Thus, the manufacturer's main quality objective is to ensure the final product is fit for its intended use. Fit for use means the product should not place patients at risk due to inadequate safety, quality, or efficacy. It is important to know that quality management is generally the responsibility of senior management. However, it requires the participation and commitment of all employees. With that, a pharmaceutical quality management system is a specific system used to manage quality in the pharmaceutical industry. The concept appeared in ICHQ 10 and has been harmonized worldwide. To design a pharmaceutical QMS, you need to leverage GMP principles and apply a quality risk management process throughout the product life cycle to facilitate innovation and continuous improvement. GMP is applicable in all stages of production, from product development to discontinuation. Remember that GMPs are not static but current. They're frequently updated as needed. Figure 1 is a flowchart featuring a systematic process designed for the assessment, control, communication, and review of risks to the quality of a medicinal product across the product lifecycle. This process is designed to facilitate and improve science-based decision-making with regard to risk. The Quality Control Department is responsible for sampling, writing specifications, testing, data reporting, and ensuring the data integrity of the analytical process. The testing activities are mainly the performance of in-process controls, environmental controls, and release controls. Other testing activities are also performed. These may include stability testing, cleaning validation testing, testing for process validation, etc. Documentation is the cornerstone of the QC process. It can be paper-based, electronic, or rooted in a hybrid system. Documentation serves as evidence that all tests have been performed according to established procedures before release. The foundations of QC are based on several different aspects and include the following. Facilities are adequate. Personnel are trained and qualified to perform specific tasks. Approved procedures are available for sampling, testing, packaging, monitoring, and environmental conditions. QC performs sampling for analysis and keeps retention samples or reference samples. Samples are drawn and tested by QC. Test methods are available and fully validated. Equipment is qualified, calibrated, and properly maintained. Records are maintained with evidence that demonstrates that all QC processes have been carried out before release. Any deviation is recorded and investigated. QC ensures all finished products contain active ingredients that comply with the qualitative and quantitative composition of the marketing authorization. The finished product must also comply with expected purity, be enclosed in the proper container, and be correctly labeled. And finally, before release, a product assessment must be completed to review and evaluate relevant production documentation. An assessment of deviations from specified procedures should be done as well. There are other important QC duties that are not specifically mentioned in the guidelines. Stability studies are performed. Reagents and reference standards are properly handled. And finally, there is one more thing worth mentioning. There is often some confusion about the role of the QC department. QC is not responsible for the release of a batch. This is the responsibility of the qualified person in accordance with the EU GMP Annex 16 requirements. QC provides the analytical results of the product to the qualified person who ultimately performs the final review and release. Product quality reviews are periodic quality reviews of all licensed medicinal products that are required by the regulatory authorities. They are usually performed annually. The main goals of PQRs are to ensure process consistency, check the appropriateness of the current specifications for starting materials and the finished product, and determine whether any trends are highlighted to identify product and process improvements. We will describe how to perform a product quality review in a future course. Although we have a course on quality risk management, I want to clarify what this term means. Quality risk management is designed to assess, control, communicate, and review all risks involved in the quality of a product. Risks must be assessed based on scientific knowledge and impact on patient safety. This is a very important concept to learn, understand, and apply in GMP processes. Refer to ICH Q9 Risk Quality Management to learn more. Knowledge of quality risk management principles is key to understanding the GMP objectives in every step of the manufacturing process. Any control or CAPA action should be based on a previous risk assessment. Adherence to GMP guidelines and their application relies entirely on people. This is what makes a robust quality culture essential to your organization's QMS. The GMP guidelines recognize that having the right number of personnel with the right qualification and practical experience is critical to ensuring product quality. Thus, an organizational chart is mandatory. People must have the right qualifications and experience to do the job. So, every function and process needs to be identified and described in a document called a job description. The responsibilities of all personnel need to be clearly outlined and understood by all parties. There are 3 key positions with responsibilities that can be rather controversial: the head of production, the head of quality control, and the qualified person. The head of QC and the qualified person belong to the quality unit, QU. They should each be independent of the head of production. Do you know why this is? It is typically expected that the manufacturing units and the QU remain independent to avoid a conflict of interest. The QU promotes quality in general practice. The responsibilities are usually divided between the QC and the quality assurance departments. QC is responsible for assessing the suitability of raw materials, packaging, labeling, in-process materials, and finished products. QC is also responsible for evaluating the performance of the manufacturing process to ensure adherence to proper specifications and limits. Based on that, QC determines the acceptability of each batch for release. QA primarily involves the review and approval of all procedures related to production and maintenance. QA reviews all associated records and audits and evaluates trend analysis. Training is very important in the GMP guidelines. In addition to having a job description for each position, it is recommended to keep a competency matrix with its role, skills, and training needs. All personnel whose activities can impact product quality need to receive initial and ongoing training. Evidence of training records should be provided whenever requested by an inspector, and training effectiveness should be periodically assessed and documented. In addition, personnel should be trained on good personal hygiene. Hygiene is critical to GMP compliance. This means all employees must be trained and equipped with proper garments and personal protective equipment to reduce the risks of infecting the product with bacteria. The organization will offer personnel an initial medical examination upon recruitment and provide ongoing examinations when necessary. Anyone experiencing an infectious disease or open lesions on an exposed surface of the body can work in the manufacturing areas of medicinal products. All personnel must wear protective garments and wash their hands before entering production facilities. Eating, drinking, chewing, and smoking are completely forbidden. The storage of food, beverages, smoking materials, and personal medication is also forbidden in production and storage areas. Premises and equipment should be designed and laid out to minimize the risk of errors, avoid cross-contamination, and prevent the buildup of dirt and dust that may affect product quality. Access to the different areas should be controlled. Only authorized people should be allowed to enter the premises, for example, through the use of an electronic badge reader. Here are some critical tips to consider. The walls, floors, and ceilings of the manufacturing area should be smooth and free from cracks and open joints. The surface should permit easy, effective cleaning and disinfection. All the rest, pipework, ventilation, lights, and so on, should be designed in a way that avoids the creation of recesses that are difficult to clean. Production areas should include a system with air control that facilitates good ventilation. A risk assessment will determine which special environmental conditions to control. Temperature, humidity, and filtration controls might be needed depending on the product type. Machines should be located to ensure easy access for regular maintenance. Some processes need dedicated lines or facilities like physical separation to avoid cross-contamination. Regarding production equipment, no part that comes in contact with the product should interact or affect the product. There are different types of reactors, such as stainless steel, glass, and so on. The type of material will depend on the type of product and solvents used in the manufacturing process. If you're interested in controlling foreign particles, there is a guideline from APIC called Guidance on Handling of Insoluble Matter and Foreign Particles in APIs. Have a look to learn more about foreign matter. Indeed, the design is very important as well, especially when it comes to easy cleaning to avoid any risk of cross-contamination. Many processes use non-dedicated equipment. In this scenario, cross-contamination is risky if the equipment is not properly cleaned. When there are instruments to measure, weigh, record, and control the equipment, these must be calibrated. An ongoing verification plan should be established here. All fixed pipeworks should be clearly labeled to indicate the contents and, where applicable, the direction of the flow. If you're interested in learning more about how to maintain clean and organized working areas, I recommend reading or being trained in lean manufacturing. There is a methodology called 5S: sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain, that is used for organizing spaces to ensure work can be performed efficiently, effectively, and safely. Storage areas are located in warehouses. Capacity should be sufficient for the storage of materials and products, starting and packaging materials, intermediate materials, bulk and finished products, products in quarantine, and products that are released, rejected, returned, or recalled. The regulation states that when a quarantine area needs to be separated, the area should be clearly marked and access restricted. The quarantine area is used for storing goods that have not yet been inspected or tested for compliance. However, many modern warehouses are fully automated. They have receiving and dispatch areas that protect the product from weather conditions. The reception areas are generally well designed to condition and clean the packages before they're stored. Approved and quarantined products are usually stored in different areas. Approved areas are identified in green, while quarantine areas are typically yellow. Rejected, recalled, or returned materials need to be separated from the rest and kept in a caged area. This area is marked in red. Why is this separation so important? The goal is to prevent the accidental mix-up or contamination of products. Quality control laboratories are separated from production areas. These spaces need to be sufficient to prevent mix-ups and cross-contamination. Cross-contamination in labs leads to false out-of-specification results that need to be investigated and resolved. Labs usually have a reception area for incoming samples, storage areas for reagents, glassware, and other materials, a separate area for paper records, and different areas for analytical instruments. Documentation and good documentation practices are an essential part of quality management systems under GMP. The basic GMP rules specify that the manufacturer must maintain proper documentation and records. The sentence, "If it's not written down, then it didn't happen," reinforces the importance of maintaining a detailed picture of how a batch has been manufactured in the past and what is being done right now. Regulatory inspectors often spend a great deal of time examining a company's documents and records. Effective documentation enhances the visibility of the QA system. Documentation has several objectives. It gives individuals instructions and guidelines on the steps to follow to make a product. It ensures everybody knows how to make a specific product and is associated with the quality checks that are needed to ensure a product of the expected level of quality. It serves as evidence that processes have been followed with records, reports, quality checks, and observations. It provides data for any investigation if there is a non-conformity, deviation, or out of specification when there is a problem with a batch of product. It provides data to assess the quality of a manufactured product before release. And finally, it shows inspectors and auditors that a manufacturing process of a particular product has been followed according to written procedures. There are different types of documents in GMP. If you remember the QMS pyramid model, there is a hierarchical structure system based on 5 levels. At the top of the pyramid is the quality policy. Below the policy are the processes. Below the processes, we have the procedures. And then there are the work instructions. And finally, we have forms, records, and templates. A site master file, SMF, is a document prepared by the pharmaceutical manufacturer. It contains specific information about the site's quality management policies and GMP activities. This document is about 25 to 30 pages plus any appendices. It is reviewed regularly to ensure it is up to date and representative of current activities. The regulatory authorities require manufacturers to create and maintain this document as part of the application to manufacture medicinal products. This allows inspectors to plan GMP inspections before visiting a manufacturing site. The site master file is divided into several chapters. First, there is a general information section that contains the contact information of the manufacturer. For example, the name, address, buildings and production units, ID number, and so forth. The authorized manufacturing activities of the site. For example, the copy of the authorization document, a short description of the authorized activities, a list of manufacturer products, a list of GMP inspection within the last 5 years, and so on. Second, there is a section related to the QMS that contains the organization's quality management system. For example, a description of the standards used, management responsibilities, accreditations, and so on. An explanation of the procedure to release the products. An explanation of the procedure to manage suppliers and contractors. An explanation of the methodologies used for quality risk management. And an explanation of the methodologies used for the compilation of product quality reviews. Third, there is a section related to personnel. Fourth, there is a section about premises and equipment that contains a description of the premises, buildings, manufacturing areas, warehouses, and the heating, steam, nitrogen, ventilation, water, and air conditioning systems, etc. List of all equipment, manufacturing and analytical. A description of the cleaning and sanitation procedures. A list of GMP computerized systems. Fifth, there is a section about documentation that describes the documentation system. For example, paper-based, electronic, hybrid, and so on. A description of the types of documents and storage areas. Sixth, there is a section about production that contains the types of products manufactured and handled, the technology used during production, a description and policies surrounding process validation, the material management and warehousing procedures. Seventh, there is a section about quality control that contains a description of the activities and types of testing, chemical, physical, biological, and microbiological. Eighth, there is a section about distribution, complaints, product defects, and product recalls. And finally, the last section is about self-inspections, that is, about planning for internal audits, external audits, and follow-up activities. An SMF is a GMP document that describes the site, major activities, key personnel, site layout, etc. as commented. However, a quality manual QM is an ISO 9001 document that describes the entire QMS. In production, you will find documents about manufacturing formula, processing, packaging, equipment use, in-process controls, SOPs, batch records, protocols and reports, personal qualifications, and so on. In quality control, you will find specifications, testing instructions, SOPs, equipment, qualification, calibration and maintenance, analytical records, protocols and reports, certificates of analysis, personal qualifications, and so on. All documentation, regardless of document type, needs to be generated and controlled according to GDoc-P. This means that documents should be approved, dated, and signed by authorized personnel. There should be adequate controls involving the design, preparation, review, and distribution of the product and the corresponding documentation. Documents, either paper or electronic, should be controlled during their life cycle according to ALCOA principles. Here, I recommend you review the course on the management and control of records. All documents should be approved, signed, and dated by appropriate and authorized persons. The documents should fit their intended use. They should be written in a style that is easily understandable and placed at the point of use. GDoc-P are a set of best practices for GMP documentation and record keeping. They are used to preserve the data integrity of critical documents and records. There are a number of GDoc tips. Let's review the most important ones. Handwritten entries should be made in a clear, concise, accurate, legible, and indelible way. Records should be recorded at the time each action is performed. Remember that backdating and postdating are not allowed, as they breach GMP rules. Records should be completed in a way where all significant activities are traceable. Inspectors tend to emphasize this. Data entries should also be traceable to the person who made the entry. This means all entries should be signed. Controls should be in place to protect the integrity of the records. The use of white correction fluid is not acceptable by any means. All documents and records that have an impact on the final product are GMP critical. They should be maintained and stored in a safe place, either manual or electronic, during the retention period. According to GMP guidelines, batch documentation must be kept for 1 year after the batch expires, or for at least 5 years after certification of the batch by the qualified person, whichever period is the longer. Additional retention requirements depend on the type of product and business. We recommend having an inventory of current document in use, either paper or electronic. Electronic document management systems facilitate the management and control of all documentation. A manufacturing formula is a document or set of documents that specify all the raw materials with their quantities and the packaging materials. This document also includes a detailed description of the procedures and precautions required to produce a specified quantity of a finished product. The processing instructions and in-process controls are included as well. The manufacturing formula and processing instructions are required for a batch product and batch size. While a batch of product is being manufactured according to the manufacturing formula, a batch processing record is recorded. A batch processing record and a batch packaging record are written records that document the entire manufacturing process and the history of a product batch. In other words, a batch processing record provides a complete record of the manufacturing and packaging history of a specific product batch. Receipt, sampling, and testing are other activities included in the manufacturing process. Procedures need to be written in detail and specific records should be completed according to GMP rules and GDoc-B. I will not go into detail here, as you can view several courses we have on documents and record management. The key aspects of the production process involve the application of technical and organizational measures to containment, with the goal of preventing mix-ups or accidental cross-contamination in production areas. These measures should come from a risk assessment that determines the extent and prioritization of all actions. It is important to know that process validation guarantees the suitability of the manufacturing process for each specific product. Process validation is the collection and evaluation of data from the process design stage through production. This documentation package establishes scientific evidence that a process is capable of consistently obtaining a quality product. Another key issue to ensure the final product quality is the quality of the starting materials. Here, the selection and qualification of suppliers is paramount. The quality of the active substances and excipients impacts the final quality directly. Control measures are needed to oversee the quality of the material received. The number and degree of appropriate measures to reduce risks to the quality of the active substance will depend on the risk assessment. The historical compliance data, like the number of deviations, non-conformities, audit findings, and so on, will define the control measures. Every single container of starting material or excipient should be identified at minimum. Full testing or partial testing will depend on the risk identified and the information received from the supplier's certificate of analysis. However, this does not exempt you from carrying out a full analysis on a frequent basis. The packaging is just as important as the starting materials or excipients. Supplier attention to quality is similar to the starting materials. There are three types of packaging: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary packaging is in direct contact with the product. It provides protection against light, moisture, gases, and solvents. It also prevents microbiological contamination. Examples of primary packaging are bottles, stoppers, vials, ampoules, blisters, and so on. Secondary packaging corresponds to the packaging that protects the primary packaging. It generally involves the branding displays and labels. It gives a second layer of protection to individual units of primary packaging. Examples of secondary packaging are pouches and boxes. Tertiary packaging gives a third layer of protection, handling and transportation of a series of sales units or secondary packages in order to group everything into unit loads during transit. Examples of tertiary packaging include boxes, bags, shrink wrap, etc. Once the final product is manufactured, the batch will remain in quarantine status until the analysis is completed and manufacturing-related documentation is evaluated. Then, the final release can be performed. If the batch is rejected because of poor quality, it should be clearly marked as such, usually using a red label, and stored separately in restricted areas until the final disposition takes place. There should also be a procedure for managing products returned from the market when there is a complaint. The product should be destroyed in this case. Otherwise, it might be reprocessed if the quality is deemed satisfactory. Quality control is mainly concerned with sampling and testing raw materials, drug substances, excipients, and final products against specifications. It also involves documenting the testing and control activities. The final results obtained in testing confirm whether the batches are compliant and suitable for release. The QC department is also responsible for establishing analytical methods, verifying pharmacopoeial methods, validating non-pharmacopoeial methods, overseeing analytical transfers, managing the reference and retention samples of materials and products, monitoring the stability studies, and participating in the investigation of complaints. The independence of QC from production is considered a fundamental GMP requirement. The manufacturing and analysis performed in outsourced organizations should be defined, agreed upon, and controlled to avoid any misunderstandings that could result in a product or operation of unsatisfactory quality. The organization or contract giver should write and agree to a contract with the outsourced company or contract acceptor that includes all the outsourced activities and operations. The contract needs to include the duties of each party, including their responsibilities and communication processes. The management of records and documentation, reference samples and deviations, non-conformities, out-of-specification results, investigations, and complaints should also be described. The contract giver should be able to audit the outsourced activities performed by the contract acceptor or by other parties. There should be responsible personnel for managing complaints and quality defect investigations and for deciding when recalls are needed. Any complaint involving product quality may have an impact on public health. In this case, the complaint should be treated with maximum urgency. Multidisciplinary teams are usually created to identify the potential root causes of the complaint and to apply CAPAs as needed. Adequate resources should be available for executing remedial actions that mitigate the risks. In the investigation, a review of other batches, and in some cases other products, is usually needed to determine whether they are also affected. Self-inspections are used to evaluate the following items' implementation and non-conformity to the principles of QA and GMP regulations. Personal issues like training and qualifications. Premises, documentation, equipment qualification, calibration and maintenance, production, QC, storage and distribution, complaints and recalls, the self-inspection process. All self-inspections should be recorded and documented. The reports should contain all the observations made during inspections as well as any proposed CAPA actions. That's all. Thank you for attending this course. I hope you find it useful and that you have learned what you expected. See you in other courses at Scilife Academy to continue your learning journey.